Yeah, so welcome Sonia, who's tuning in from Berlin. Yeah, and it's just nice to have so many people joining us from abroad as well, because that's the advantage of these online events, is that we can tune into people from all over the world. I'm leading a retreat in India in a couple of weeks' time. It's for Indian order members. I've been informed there's going to be 120 people there, and with me tuning in from Tiratnaloka in Wales. So there is an advantage actually of feeling connected to people all over the world. And and we're looking today at this theme about why join an order. So some of you have asked for ordination. Some of you are thinking about asking for ordination. Maybe some of you are feeling very inspired about that decision, or some of you sort of just want to know, what next to do, and kind of sometimes we do need to reinvigorate ourselves to go back to why we asked for ordination in the first place. I remember it was an extremely significant event for me. In those days, we don't say it so much, but I think it's actually probably still a good thing to do. But in those days, you had to write your entire life story and post it. And I remember this kind of fat envelope and my hand going towards the post box and that little slot and thinking, this is it. Once I let go of my fingers, the process has started, So and I wanted to make the kind of theme of this talk entering the tiger's cave. But I thought, well, it's entering the tiger's cave, which I'll say a little bit more about later. But I also wanted to say that it's with a bit of flair. It might be because I've been watching a bit of Pose on BBC iPlayer, which is this American. I really, really love. I don't know how this is going to come across, but I really love watching drag queen movies. And Pose is about some drag queens in New York in the 80s. And I think there's a spirit in there I want to imbibe of sort of flair, and also there's a kind of mixture of sort of vulnerability and flair and a bit of pizzazz. I looked up flair in the dictionary, which is a combination of instinct and talent and ability, but also kind of sparkle and pizzazz. And it's literally from the Latin to smell sweet. I didn't know that. Yeah, so that's my new word for today, is flair. If you're going to do it with flair. And of course, one doesn't have to ask for ordination. You could live a life imbued with the Dharma, a very good life. You could, keep up a good meditation. I'm just going to put myself on gallery. Yeah. You could keep up a good meditation practice and go to the center regularly and get to know Dharma friends and live a good life with meditation and the precepts, weekly mitra study. Whatever it is. So that's an option available. You could be a good mitra, a good friend to the Buddhist community. And that's great. Karmically, that's an extremely positive life to live. I don't think everyone needs to ask for ordination. I think that you could live a good Buddhist life. And karmically, that would be a very, very positive life to lead, and a rich life to lead. But for me, I don't think that would have ever been enough to be a good mitra. I think actually I asked for ordination before I became a mitra. I think I asked for ordination before I asked to be a mitra, actually. It was slightly historical because for various reasons. But I realized that if I was going to commit myself to something, I was going to commit myself to something completely and fully. And that's the kind of life I wanted to lead. I wanted to lead a life that was fully engaged and life immersed in something. I wanted to take it to its ends as far as it could go. And I realized that actually, one of the things that Sangharakshita says is, he said, if your life is going to be deep, by the necessity, it has to be narrow. You know, I didn't want to just do well at a number of different things. I wanted to fully give myself to something. And in a way, I can see that I was waiting for something to come that would be fully encompassing, that would fully embrace my whole being, my thoughts, my emotions, my activity, my friendships, everything. I wanted to be fully immersed in their life. So yes, and I'm very attracted to this image of the tiger's cave, because in the tiger's cave, it said that it's Padmasambhava's tiger's cave, it's associated with Padmasambhava, but they say about the tiger's cave that there's many footprints leading in, but none leading out. So there's this image of entering into something. And you know what caves are like? Caves are kind of dark, but they're very, very compelling. You don't know what's in there until you go in. And of course, when you go into a cave, there's mysteries inside. There's ancient cave paintings and strange troglodytes, they're called, aren't they? They're little strange little animals, and stalactites. I always love this idea of a cave. And then, of course, with the tiger's cave, if you go in there, you're not coming out, or not in your current form anyway. So there's this idea of something almost terrifying, but compelling and exciting. And it will change you. You won't be the same when you go in as when you come out, if you come out at all. And that's what I was looking for in the Dharma life, in a sense. I didn't want to just be have a life influenced by the Dharma. I wanted my life to be the Dharma. I wanted my life to be the truth. You know, well, why not? Why not do it with flair? Why not do it with your whole being, rather than just kind of being a good Buddhist on the edges, if you see what I mean? Why not let it be at the center, the guiding force, the guiding principle of one's life, the hearth at the center of life? So yes, and I think in the tiger's cave, you know, what's the most terrifying thing? What's the most sort of compelling and terrifying thing? I think for most people, myself included, it will be other people. It will be the community aspect of the three jewels. So more than just the ideal of Buddhahood, more than just the Buddha's teachings, I think the Buddhist community is the thing that's really compelling and terrifying. It's a bit like, you know, if you've ever been lonely in your life, which I have been lonely in my life, and I used to wander around the streets quite a bit. I grew up in South London, and I sort of wander about, and you know, that's a really sad, tragic thing where it's kind of autumn, and so people haven't closed their curtains, but the light's on inside, and everyone's having a party or having fun inside, and you're on the outside looking in. There's something about that you're kind of drawn towards people, but also they're other, they're terrifying. Who are they, and who are you in relation to them? And it felt a bit like that with the Sangha when I first kind of got involved. It was a bit like watching people involved in something and very much keeping myself on the outside. You know, it took me a long time to make an offering. And like, why were all these people doing these things with a shrine? But then there was a moment where actually we all went on retreat. I think going on retreat is a hugely significant event. And in those days in South London, we did camping retreats for our retreats near Glastonbury. They were a bunch of hippies. I'm telling you, Emma should know the history of her own centre. But so we were a bunch of hippies, and we went to this field and, I don't know, jangled some tambourines and meditated, and then told stories by the fire. That was really good fun. And then I came back, and someone had taken a load of photos, and they put them up on the wall of the Buddhist centre as you went in. And I remember seeing pictures of me with all these people and thinking, oh yeah, I'm part of that. I'm actually, if someone walks into this this center, they'll see me and see that I'm one of those people. And I loved it, you know, I really, really love those people. And many of us are in the order now. Kamala Gita, you may know. And Amara Pushpa, she was in South London Buddhist Centre as well. So many of us became order members. And yeah, so joining a community is compelling and attractive. And it's also scary. You know, who are we going to be when we come out of that? Of course, we've got that story of the Buddha and Ajatasattu, where King Ajatasattu, you know, he's lived a troubled life. Well, he's killed his own father, which doesn't do wonders for your mental state. He goes into the forest with his herds of elephants and his army and his harem, and eventually has to get off the elephant and walk in this terrifying forest. And he feels like he's being led into a trap because it's so silent and still. And then he comes to the clearing, and in the clearing is the Buddha seated at the center of a kind of mandala of his disciples, and they're all silent. And the Buddha shines like the sun in the midst of the assembly. And then King Ajatasattu arrives, and he's not the biggest thing. You know, this is a king. This is a person who killed his own father to take the throne, who's has armies that have conquered northern India, who everyone fears and respects. And he's the highest in any situation. He takes the energy, and he's suddenly in a context where he's not taking the energy anymore. There's the Buddha, seated like the sun in the midst of the assembly, facing the east. And he turns to King Ajatasattu and gives him his full attention. So in a way, that's what we're like. We're sort of walking through the forest, walking through the woods, wondering what's happening. And we meet the community, and the community is kind of bigger than us. I love that. I don't want things to be at my level, because I want to grow. So I want things to be at a kind of more mysterious, bigger, more concentrated level than I am. So we've also got the story that Bhante talks about in the extract that we've given you, where he talks about Ananda, you know, in a little flush of inspiration. I always feel for Ananda in this situation, poor old thing, you know. He arrives, and he says that he's talking to the Buddha, and he says to the Buddha, he says, oh, you know, spiritual friendship is half the spiritual life. And the Buddha turns around and says, say not so, Ananda, say not so. Spiritual friendship is the whole of the spiritual life. But what's really interesting about that passage is he says why. I'm hoping I've sort of sent it to Karen and Dee, and hopefully we'll have it in the puja tonight, because I won't read it all. But it's a really interesting passage. Why is spiritual friendship the whole of the spiritual life? And he says to Ananda, when a follower has spiritual friends, they can be expected to develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path. And how does a follower who has spiritual friends develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path? There is the case where a follower develops perfect vision, perfect emotion, perfect speech, perfect action, perfect livelihood, perfect effort, perfect mindfulness, and perfect meditation, arising out of independence of the heart, which gives rise to freedom from intoxication, which gives rise to cessation from greed, hatred, and delusion, which matures in release. This is how a follower who has spiritual friends develops and pursues the Noble Eightfold Path. And I think there's a mystery in that passage. This is something that I've been reflecting on again and again, because the mystery of that passage is that, well, we can understand that our friends help us develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path. But he doesn't just say that. He says that the Noble Eightfold Path arises out of independence of the heart, which is translation of viveka, which is also translated as solitude and even loneliness. So you've got this combination of the Noble Eightfold Path and that arising out of solitude, maturing in release and freedom, and all of that taking place in the context of friendship. So you've got solitude independence of heart, even loneliness. And in the context, and developing the Eightfold Path in the context of friendship. So yes, so this quality of viveka is also arising out of friendship. You wouldn't think those two things, would you? You wouldn't think that the quality of solitude would arise out of spiritual friendship. But I did actually talk to Sangharakshita about this once. I said, you know, I've been reading the early Buddhist texts, and they talk about this quality of viveka and solitude. And obviously we put a lot of emphasis in our movement on friendship. And I was just wondering if you had anything else to say about the importance of viveka, of solitude. And he said, well, one has to have the ability to be on one's own, and one should spend some time alone every day, and the order members should have at least a month solitary every year, which I mean, yes, of course, Banting was, yes. I was thinking, a chance be a fine thing. Anyway, but yes, I mean, ideally, I do take his point, and I do try and have at least 3 weeks solitary a year. Solitary retreat a year, but yeah, a month would be better. So viveka in the Pali tradition has 3 forms. The first form is kaya viveka. So physically being on our own, being able to be physically on our own. Kaya means body. So being able to go away on solitary retreat. I think there's also part of that, I think, is about meditation itself, which is in a way we are alone in meditation. Even if we're in a room full of people, you have to turn to a certain extent inwards to one's own mind. And then you've got chitta viveka, which means independence of thought and heart, being able to think for yourself, being able to know what you think, being able to make your own decisions, being able to follow your own heart's calling. So, you know, one of the things in the ordination process is we're never going to tell you what to do. Sometimes people, you can really feel they really want you to tell them what to do. But yeah, as an ordination team member, you try not to do that, because if you do that and it all goes wrong, you'll get blamed. But also, it's not about what we do. The ordination process is about enabling people to think for themselves and to follow their own heart's calling and know what's in their heart, know what's your heart calling. And no one can give you that. No one can tell you what that is. You have to find it yourself. So there's chitta viveka, and there's also upadi viveka, which means, literally it means kind of putting down a foundation. And this is the foundation of a fixed and separate selfhood. So upadi viveka is another name for enlightenment, for the heart's release, for freedom, for spiritual friendship, maturing in release. So it's interesting because it means that spiritual friendship doesn't mean we become more attached or dependent on people. I think sometimes that's the fear with friendship, is like, you know, if I develop my friendship, then I'll be emotionally caught up or attached or dependent on another person. Spiritual friendship actually enables us to be on our own. It enables us to be on our own physically. You know, I think there's a sense of going on solitary retreat where you feel supported by your friends to be able to be on your own physically, supported by your friends to be able to turn into your own mind and your own consciousness. And we give each other that confidence. We say, no, you're going to be okay. You know, it'll be fine. We give each other that confidence and encouragement. And also encouragement to think and feel for ourselves. So spiritual friendship enables us to be able to think for ourselves, to know what we think and fears. Our friends draw this out of us. And this, of course, is what Bhante talks about in the extract that we've been looking at. He says, we get to know ourselves best in relation to other people. We see ourselves more clearly. In a way, friendship is a mirror. We're beings that live in relation to others. If we go off on our own, we'll find out about ourselves to a certain extent, but we won't find the fullness of ourselves because we need that mirror of friendship. And there's a lot of stories about this in the Buddhist tradition. You know, there's the story about for example, the hermit who goes off for a 12-year solitary retreat and comes back, and before he left, his wife made him a radish curry, and when he comes back, he asks for the radish curry. It's almost like, and gets very angry with her because she hasn't got this radish curry. So it's almost like he realized that, yes, he's gone away for 12 years. He's gone into the depths of his own mind, but that is just preparation for being with other people and what comes up for us with other people. And if if you're in the order, if you enter into the Sangha to any extent, particularly if you live and work with other Buddhists, it's like, or anyone actually, if you just interact with anyone, you'll see yourself much more clearly because you see where your reactions are. And, and Bhante talks about the mechanism of how friendship is a mirror. He says friendship disturbs aspects of us which have been rather deeply buried. So again, in the Pali tradition, we've got a kind of a teaching about this, which is that latent in every consciousness are the anusayas, and the anusayas are our latent tendencies. And they've been built up over lifetimes. They've been built up over lifetimes, and they've also been built up through previous experience and previous actions that we've undertaken. I think a lot of them are built up from childhood experiences because, of course, when one is a child, one's learning how to operate in the world, and we take everything in. As we get older, we don't need to take in so much information. But when we're young, we need to take it in everything so that we can learn how to operate in the world. And that's why time seems so much bigger when you're a child, because there's so much information going in. You kind of live a longer time than when you're an adult, which time goes quicker because you're taking in less and less information, or retaining less and less information, because your brain sorts things into things that you need and things that you don't need. So when we're young, we're learning habits, we're kind of making our own habits. And Buddhism says you've also carried through some habits from a previous life. But even without that, even just in childhood, you've started to develop certain ways, coping strategies of learning how to operate in the world. And these create these anusayas, these latent tendencies. And then what happens is that they are literally, the Pali means whipped up. They're whipped up, they're stimulated, they come out into consciousness. And friendship is the sort of dimension in which they come out into consciousness. And the significance of friendship is that when they do come out into consciousness, we have a context in which to change how we respond to them. So in the Pali, you've got 3 stages. You've got the latent tendency, you've got the tendency whipped up, and then you've got the karmically active phase, which is how you act out those tendencies. And if you react, if you just go through the same kind of habit that you've always done, you'll set up that latent tendency in the future. You've kind of carved yourself an emotional groove that will just repeat the same cycle in the future. But if you have a context in which you can change, when you've got your dear friend with you saying, you don't need to do that anymore, or is that skillful, or is it true? You can do something different and create a different karmic habit that will create something different in the future. You don't have to act out your latent tendencies. So, friendship is, Bhante also calls it heat. This is from the Dhammapada, calling friendship a heat. Tapo is the Pali word, which literally means heat. So friendship is a heat, and in the same way that heat draws things out, friendship draws out our anusayas, draws out our latent tendencies. And in the Pali tradition, they're very much talked about in negative terms, but I don't think they are all negative. If I think about my own life, I think there are even some sort of slightly darker threads, a tendency towards loneliness and depression and sort of negative thinking. But then there's also a thread of extreme faith and beauty, and I can see both of those. I can see I can see that there's also a being there who responds to what's beautiful and good and true. And I've always responded to what's good and beautiful and true. And that's manifested in various ways in my life. So I think what happens is that these all come out in friendship, but because you've got good spiritual friends, they can help us take our anusayas towards the beautiful. So literally, Kalyana Mitrata, spiritual friendship, means beautiful friendship. Kalyana is from the root kal, which means to inspire or urge on or urge upwards. And Kalyana has this threefold meaning of what's good and true and beautiful. So within the mess of the anusayas kind of getting whipped up and us desperately trying to kind of keep our heads above water, our friends can lead us on to something that's more beautiful, can encourage the beautiful within us, the good, the true, and the beautiful within us. It's almost like, you know, these things get whipped up and there's demons and there's darkenings. And the demons, they're not negative. Anusayas aren't because you're a bad person. It's just in a way we've developed them to keep ourselves safe in the world. So they are in a way an aspect of love. They're an aspect of learning how to make ourselves safe in the world. But, you know, maybe we don't need to have those particular habits at this moment. And our friends can help us to discern what to do with these anusayas that have been whipped up. The main thing is that if you ignore your latent tendencies, your anusayas, they don't go away. Sadly, I think I can often hide my more negative traits, and it's become clear to me that actually I can't. I think if I don't open my mouth, they won't come out, but actually I give off a certain energy. So, you know, I think living in communities, it's, you know, been pointed out that people do pick up on when I'm grumpy, and that I need to look at that and work out what's happening and have a more positive outlook. When I was working in the Evolution shop in Sheffield, I had this pact that if I got in a bad mood, they used to call me the vortex of darkness, because I'd be in such a bad mood. I mean, I have improved. I'm just telling you,
Yes.
I've improved. It would be like I was just sort of sucking the energy of this kind of dark vortex. And I had this pact that if I got into that mood, I had to leave the shop and walk around the block. And my extra thing to that was I had to find an opportunity to do something for someone else in that little walk around the block. It did work, actually. And then Karen Adi has improved on this method of cheesy music. She won't let me listen to any depressing music. I have to listen to positive music. So my taste in music has become quite cheesy, which is probably why I'm watching programs about drag queens. But anyway. So yes, we cannot transform ourselves unless we have a full sense of what lies within us. We've got to have a full sense of what lies within us. And it's friendship that's going to bring that out, and friendship that's going to help us transform that. And it's so satisfying, you know, we've had these experiences of being in a team or going on retreat with other Sangha members, and we spark each other off. There's these little tender shoots of growth, which we encourage and rejoice in. You know, we're allowed to be sincere about the spiritual life. Of course, there's so much in context in life where, I don't know, maybe it's just my family is very, very English, but you know, that we don't encourage other people's sincerity and faith. But we're allowed to do that. We have a context for that in the Sangha. I remember just this relief of being able to talk about meaningful things with people. What a relief, my goodness. Just felt like I was drinking for the first time, you know. I've been thirsty and I was drinking in the South London Buddhist Centre at that time. We used to just lie on the sofas and just chat about kind of meaningful things and philosophy and Buddhism and life and emotions till about, I don't know, 1 a.m. And yes, and that tradition has clearly been carried on in the young people's events, where we also chatted around the fire till 1 a.m, which nearly killed me. But yeah, I got up there 7 o'clock meditation the next morning. But you know, what a wonderful thing that we can do that. What a wonderful thing that we can share ourselves fully we've got a context which we can share ourselves fully. So yes, we encourage each other on the Noble Eightfold Path. And it's encouragement. It's not a pressure. We're not telling you you've got to do this, otherwise we'll withdraw affection or love from you. We're exploring it together, and friendship is the context in which we do that, in which we practice the Eightfold Path, and which we encourage each other to follow the Eightfold Path. And I think within that friendship, and I think this is why I joined an order, is because I wanted a Vajrakula, what's called a Vajrakula in Tantric Buddhism. And the Vajrakula is Kula means a kind of group of people, and Vajra means reality, a kind of getting to the heart of reality Kula. Because I wanted people around me, and I wanted to practice a spiritual life for people around me who were really going to take it to its end, to really going to aim for that depth with me. And who were going to support each other in that. And I think generally the order is that. I think there's also Vajrakulas within the Vajrakula, if you see what I mean. So there's like, the order is made up of very, very many and varied people, as you already know, because you already know order members. But within that, we all share our practice. We all share our commitment to practice. We all share our commitment to the precepts. And meditation and the path of ethics, meditation and wisdom. We all share that to quite a high degree. So we all share our commitment. And then within that, something quite wonderful can emerge. And there's some people that, you know, through circumstance and living and working with people I've known for years and years and years, that have seen me through everything in different contexts. And even some people who I don't see that regularly, but as soon as I go to an order convention or some sort of order event or retreat and I see them, I know them in a special sort of way. I might not know everything that's happened in the last, I don't know, 3 months, but I know them. I know what's important to them. They know what's important to me. And sometimes we can have this little communication that goes immediately to depth. I remember sitting down next to breakfast once on an order convention with Sri Sambhava, who I don't know that well. And we just immediately had this very, very deep communication where I felt like I really, in that moment, completely saw her and she completely saw me. And it didn't take long, but there was an invitation to depth that happened very, very spontaneously. And Bhante says in the extract that we've been reading, he says there's a common allegiance to the first two refuges constitutes the bond of unity between the members of the spiritual community. A common allegiance to the first two refuges constitutes the bond of unity between the members of the spiritual community. There is a bond of unity in the order. There's a bond of unity even for people who are training for ordination. We take the vows of ordination, which is, see if I can remember them off the top of my head, for the attainment of enlightenment, with loyalty to my teachers, in harmony with friends and companions, and for the sake of all beings, I accept this ordination. So there are these vows that include your own spiritual practice, your commitment to practicing within an order, and your dedication to helping all beings. So there's a bond of unity, and there's also something special, I think. There is a bit of magic. There's a bit of magic around ordination that is, when you've been through that ritual, something happens, something changes. It's Kali Chitta talks about it as a depth charge that's put into your being, and you kind of know the other people who've got a depth charge because you're sincerely and deeply committed to the Buddhist life. and something happens. You know, there's these very strange groups sometimes of order members. There's some people who I think it's only the order that's putting us in the same room. Sometimes I feel that even on GFR retreats, you know, you've got, I remember having one group with someone who'd just been on a hunt saboteur, sort of, she was an anarchist and a Tory MP. And they were both, so if you're not from the UK, Tory MP is like, so definitely right from centre political beliefs, who was inspired by Margaret Thatcher, which, you know, for us is like, you know, politically, they were completely the opposite ends of the spectrums, and they got on really, really well. And they said to each other at the end, there is no way I would have talked about my inner process with you in any other context. And that's how I sometimes feel in the order. It's like, there's like, wow, I'm here with you. But there's something much deeper. There's something much deeper than kind of gender and race and upbringing and all the things, even political beliefs sometimes. There's something that bonds us. The bond of unity. Bond in Sanskrit is samaya, an agreement or contract, a coming together. There's a coming together and an unspoken agreement of what's most important to us. And that is a bond. And I do believe that bond will last for lifetimes. I think the order probably will be reborn together if we haven't already. I definitely get the sense I have been reborn with other people already. That's another story. So yes, and this bond of unity is also felt, you know, if we look at the stories of the Buddha. One of my favorite stories, which some of you, I've told some of you, I'm sure, but my favorite stories in the Pali Canon is that the Buddha calls out Ananda, and they're in Savatthi, so it's later on in the Buddha's life. It's I've got reason to think it might have been late at night, and the Buddha calls out Ananda, and he says, do you approve of Sariputta? Now, Sariputta's not there. Sariputta's like the Buddha's chief disciple. So Ananda's not going to say, no, I don't actually. I've been meaning to tell you for a while, I really don't like Sariputta. It's just not going to, that's not where this conversation is going to go. The Buddha just says, oh, do you approve of Sariputta to Ananda? And Ananda said, well, yes. I mean, you'd be mad not to approve of Sariputta. He's so wise. He's got great wisdom, joyful wisdom, wide wisdom. And he starts rejoicing in Sariputta's merits. And the Buddha sits there and nods. And then the Buddha joins in and says, indeed, it is so. Sariputta is wide wisdom, joyous wisdom, sharp wisdom. And they just talk about Sariputta, and they're just mutually rejoicing in Sariputta's merits. Sariputta's not in this story, so I don't know where Sariputta was, but he's not party to this rejoicing in his merits. And then as they're rejoicing, something really wonderful happens, which is that Susama, I think he's a prince of the Devas, one of the kind of, one could look at it like a spirit or a god. He comes, but more like a nature spirit, more like in The Tempest or something, like Ariel. But yeah, so you've got this kind of, this nature spirit, Susama, comes with all his friends, this huge retinue, and they just start glowing with different coloured lights. And there's quite a just vivid description. He said it's like the sun after the monsoon, like gold on a brocade cloth, like jewels. They start glowing and radiating in different colours, sparkling with light, lighting up Savatthi, lighting up the Jeta Grove, lighting up the night with all these magical, wonderful, beautiful colours, lighting up the sky. And they start rejoicing in Sariputta's merits. So you've got the Buddha and Ananda, two old friends, rejoicing in Sariputta, and then all these gods kind of lighting up the whole place with these beautiful, bright lights. And they're all rejoicing in Sariputta. And the Buddha just nods, and Susama says, Sariputta is the disciple adorned with the teacher's praise. And the Buddha said, Sariputta awaits the time. So I think this is very, very significant, this story, because why would the Buddha want to rejoice in Sariputta in the middle of the night? Like, why would you want, it didn't have any purpose. Sariputta didn't need encouragement. Ananda didn't need encouragement. The Buddha didn't need encouragement. It wasn't like anyone was in a bad mood with Sariputta and needed to think more positively about him. There was a need in the Buddha to rejoice. There was a need in the Buddha to dwell with spiritual friendship and dwell in rejoicing. It was the need in the Buddha to just reflect on his friendships. And it's very unusual for a spiritual teacher. And the end of the story is they just go to bed, nothing happens with that. But why would the Buddha need to do that? And he also said, after I was enlightened, I wondered who to look up to and who to respect and revere. And I realized I could respect the Dharma itself. But then he also says, and when the Sangha attained to greatness, I could look up and revere and rely on them too. So when the Sangha attained to greatness. So there's something about the potential of friendship. And Bhante also talks about this when he brings in this quote from the Dhammapada. Blissful is the Sangha following a common path. The blaze of spiritual practice of those on the same path is blissful. Sukha. There's the attraction of higher forces. There's attraction of bliss, of happiness, the creation of light and imagination. And what's interesting is Sangharakshita says that Sukha is the subjective experience of shunyata. So we experience shunyata when we see into the nature of reality. We understand that reality is empty. It's empty of any kind of definition. It's empty of any kind of way that we close down around it. We make a story out of it. We make a narrative around it. And he says that, so understand reality is to understand reality as being shunyata, as empty. But that's the objective pole of our experience, is understanding reality as something. But there's also a subjective pole to our experience, which is that when we understand that reality is shunya, it's devoid of definitions, it's devoid of greed, hatred, and delusions. It can't be defined, it can't be pinned down in our limited consciousness. When we realize that, what emerges is bliss. So bliss is the subjective counterpart of an understanding of shunyata. So it's very interesting that bliss should be associated with spiritual friendship. And Bhante also says that it's spiritual friendship which is the emotional equivalent to our intellectual understanding of shunyata. It's friendship that brings out what shunyata really means and the implications of our lives. And it's through friendship that we enjoy a realization of shunyata. So through friendship, we cease to identify ourselves as subject in relation to object. We cease to define ourselves in such a fixed way between self and other. We enter into another's world more deeply, and we enter into our own world more deeply, as we've seen. So we question our narratives. I question my narrative about myself. I question this narrative about, that I'm a bit depressed and alone. There's a narrative I have about a lonely heroine. I'm on my own. I think when I came to the Buddha, I was just a bit of a scrapper. I'd spent a long time wandering about on my own in the streets of South London, getting into trouble. And I was a bit of a scrapper in some way, which if you don't know English, it means a kind of little bit of a fighter. And I took that attitude to the Sangha. And then I've had to question that. I've had to question what the limitations of my own consciousness are. I've had to question my own views about myself and look at those things. And I've also had to question my narratives about other people. I've pinned them down. I've decided who they are. I've decided we can or we can't be friends, which is shown to be very limited in my experience of the order. I've become friends with people, you know, who I didn't get on with when I was training for ordination on retreat with them. So we question our narratives and we enter into each other's world more fully. We free ourselves in a particular way from defining our, that fixed definition, that fixed self-view, that kind of enclosed defensiveness against the world. We kind of expand out from that. We expand out of a tight way of being, and we include other people. We feel other people. We feel other people's practice. We resonate with other people's practice. You know, Bhante calls communication a vital mutual responsiveness, which means that we feel each other, we respond to each other. And eventually that response to each other culminates in a beautiful, aware silence. And sometimes I have that experience in the order, on an order convention, when we're just seated in silence, but it's an aware and vibrant silence where everybody is taken in and we feel all of us together and we know what's most important. We feel what's most important for all of us. So what does it feel like to dwell in that dimension, to dwell in shunyata, to dwell in that unknowing beyond definition? What's it like to truly be there with a friend in that kind of vibrant awareness of what's most important to each other? It feels like heat, and it feels like bliss, and it feels like living and dwelling in the Dharma Dhatu. So I really love this passage of Bhante, because he goes from like sort of typical Bhante, it sort of goes from things that are really quite practical, like we know each other's bad habits and we encourage each other's good habits. And you think, yes, 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 I understand that. And then you turn the page, and he starts talking about the bond of unity. And then he starts talking about bliss. And then he starts to just mentions at the end, dwelling in the Dharma Dhatu. And you think, oh, right, okay. Well, that's the potential of the order. That's why I joined the order, because I wanted to dwell in the Dharma Dhatu. Got no idea really what that means. It doesn't mean that we're constantly sitting in a Dharma talk, just to let you know. You'll be glad here. This will finish. But yeah, so Dhatu means element or dimension or realm or sphere. And I think what it means is that Dharma doesn't move with you. It's not like you've got your consciousness and you're thinking about the Dharma, and then you just stop thinking about the Dharma and you think about something else. And the Dharma isn't that the Dharma sort of arises in those moments. That's what we have mostly, is we have these kind of, the Dharma arises in moments of communication where something more beautiful comes into being, something more vibrant, like a little flame. It's not that the Dharma moves with you or with me. It doesn't mean that Dharma doesn't move with us. It means we move within the Dharma. Our consciousness moves within the Dharma, the sphere of the Dharma, the element of the Dharma itself. This is the dimension in which we move. This is the dimension in which we exist all the time, in every thought, waking or sleeping. This is the dimension that we're composed of. We're composed of reality and always moving with reality, and reality is within us. I've got this poem actually by a Christian mystic, which I think gives a sense of what it might be like to dwell in the Dharma Dhatu with friends, because this particular form of Christian mysticism is women communities, and they wrote a lot of poetry about love itself, and love being a kind of higher goal. So this is Beatrice of Nazareth, and she's from the Low Countries. Think about, when was she? Around the year 1200. And so as the fish swims in the vastness of the oceans and rests in the deeps, and as the bird boldly soars in the heights and the vastness of the air, in the same way she feels her spirit roam free through the depths and the heights and the immensity of love. She feels her spirit roam free through the depths and the heights and the immensity of love. So this is the element in which we move in the potential of friendship. So yes, Bhante starts off practical, why you need an order to get to know ourselves. We know ourselves through relationship. We let friendships bring out our anusayas. And he talks about the bond that exists between us, between order members. And he ends with this vision of where it can take us. And sometimes we can taste that. Sometimes we can taste where friendship, where practicing with an order can take us. And going back to the image of the tiger's cave, the order will change us. But it's more than that. It's not just that we're going to, hopefully we will become better people. It's not just we're going to become better people. It's more that through practicing with others, we can enter into the unity of bliss and emptiness. And that's not always actualized in every order communication. It's a potential, and it's a potential that's always slightly hanging there, always slightly hanging there in any communication with those spiritually committed. And of course, we do come out of the tiger's cave, different than when we went in. But what could we do for the world if we were those people? What could we do for the world if we came out as tigers, fully in touch with ourselves and with our energy, uniting bliss and emptiness and working together as a community? What could we accomplish in this world? I think we could make a real difference. So really, the reason why I joined this order anyway is that I'd rather be a tiger. I'd rather be a tiger with other tigers, making a difference in the world and bringing a bit of magic to the world, bringing the Dharma Dhatu to the world.